Welcome to YATESY'S ESPRESSO BAR.
Hello there and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. It's Rich here and it's time for another visit to YATESY'S ESPRESSO BAR, in which we will have a look at some of the stories coming out of the City Ground and just have a little chat about how the season is going in a year that has really been like no other. But then we seem to say that every year, don't we? I'm joined by the Maradona of the Midlands. Maradona, thank you very much for hosting our match report after Sunday's game against Aston Villa, and it was good to hear you and Baz having a bit of a discussion. We'll come back to that a little bit later on, but I will also mention that Baz did talk about having some optimism when it came to thinking about where Forest are at right now and thinking about how they could do as the season goes on. Let's just play in a little clip to whet the appetite.
They're all big weeks, but this is again a big week. I would like us to win the Europa League, and I'd like us to stay up. And I don't see why we can't, because actually, on now that Pereira's sort of got us gelling a little bit, we look like the players look like, one, they know what they're supposed to do, and two, they're enjoying themselves. And those two things together should put us back to somewhere near the kind of levels that we were at last season.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a little glimpse of that just with the Chris Woods cameo. Just for that 10 minutes or so, it just seemed like all our problems had been solved and the solution had been there all along.
So, Maradona, I think it's fair to say that, you know, it was a hard-fought point, wasn't it, against Villa? And I think it's also fair to say that with regards to how that leaves Forest, Forest fans have gained a lot of optimism compared to, let's say, 3 weeks ago before we had that second leg against Midlands and that victory against Spurs. So let's have a few thoughts from you, firstly, about how Pereira has done since he's come in as the manager.
I mean, he's done okay. I think he's brought in a bit more of a controlled footballing game back to the team, a bit more style maybe, and a few more goals. Let's be honest, that was the big thing that was missing under the previous manager, was goals. But I think he's done okay. I think as the sort of spring has sprung outside and the birds are singing and the daffodils are blooming, everybody's feeling a little bit more optimistic anyway after the hard long winter. But he's done okay. He's got that sort of controlled, chill vibe about him that Nuno had, rather than sort of aggressive bouncer vibe that maybe somebody else had.
Yeah, you know what? I was thinking about this with the post-match interviews, because obviously we heard from Nico Williams, we heard from Pereira, and when Nico was talking about, you know, the gaffers told me to shoot more, and when Pereira was talking about how Nico is, he's not a victim. He could easily have kind of let the weight of the world get on his shoulders after that penalty shootout for Wales. And if Nuno was a kind of a father figure, I think Vítor Pereira is kind of maybe a favourite uncle, isn't he?
Well, yes, I think he's slightly older than Nuno, so maybe he's Nuno's older brother. I don't know. I don't know the family dynamics, but I think you need to do that in the modern game. You can't have that sort of
dictatorial
dictatorial approach these days, because one, you're dealing with a bunch of millionaires who can say sod it, I don't care, and it will have no effect on their lifestyle. It's not like the old days where if a manager dropped you, you were seriously worried about your future and your mortgage and all those sort of things. So they've lost that power. And also just young people are different now from what they were 30 years ago. They're a lot softer. They're a lot more in touch with their emotions. And they're a lot more open with expressing them. And so you need a slightly different approach. And you need that sort of emotional intelligence is the word that or the phrase that sort of banded about. I think even I may have banded it about even in Steve Cooper days, just to sort of get the best out of your players and your squad rather than making enemies of them. And I think Vitor's done that.
Yeah, and I think it was, I can't remember if it was Brian Laws or Steve Hodge was saying on Radio Nottingham about how, unlike, for example, some other managers who are out there, he is broadly content to not be in the limelight, isn't he? The time that he gave fist pumps after the Spurs match, he was pretty reluctant. The players literally had to push him into it. And given everything that's happened at the club in the last year, in a very turbulent season, as I said at the start of the podcast, actually there's something to be said for having that slightly more withdrawn approach, just focus upon getting the job done without needing to have a big song and dance about everything.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing we need at our club is more noise and more attention drawn to ourselves. Just being sort of controversial for the sake of it, and attention seeking, and sort of sound bites in press conferences. Because there's so much noise going on all the time anyway, due to our owner, due to sort of the erratic way we perform, from being brilliant one season to terrible the next, and all those sort of things. And so having that calm influence, it's got to help. It's got to produce a tranquil atmosphere for the players to thrive in.
Okay. You mentioned authoritarianism, or you tried to, and dictatorial attitudes and approaches. Let's talk about one of the most recent gaffer at the club. Sean Dyche, as we've discussed before, has been doing the rounds on the podcast circuit. And also, something that caught the eye recently for a lot of Forest fans was his appearance on TalkSport. Not just for the fact that he's doing the rounds and making public appearances and talking about how he was right and everyone else is wrong, but the fact that he was being interviewed by a certain Jonathan Owen. Did you listen to it? What did you have to say about it? Did you have any strong thoughts? Because, frankly, I feel it's even the first podcast appearances were getting a bit annoying, and now it's getting nauseating.
Did listen to it. I went into it without any strong feelings one way or the other. I just was interested to hear what he had to say, and if Johnny Owen would sort of press him on some of the things that have come out. But I got more and more annoyed and angry as I listened to it. And it just, there's no sort of journalistic approach from Johnny Owen. It was basically two friends on the radio having a laugh. And and
when you want that, you listen to Hawksby and Jacobs.
I listen to Hawksby and Jacobs, but even they'll still criticise each other, and highlight each other's flaws. But it was just ridiculous, some of the things he was coming out with, I don't know why. I don't know why he's doing these media duties all over the place. I don't know why he's doing
appearance fees. I mean, having said that, he doesn't need the money right now, does he?
No, he doesn't need the money. I don't see. And it's
ego.
Ego, yeah. And normally, when a manager leaves a club, there's confidentiality clauses where they don't say anything at all, really. So I don't know if Forest haven't done that this time around. I'm not sure what's happened there, but it's strange. I don't get why he's doing it. He's got nothing to gain from it, and he's just making himself look even worse. And I felt a bit sorry for when he was sacked, but just the lack of self-awareness now is just startling, really.
Yeah, and I mean, to go back to what you said about you went into it with no strong feelings, at a time when some other Forest fans, including Baz on this very podcast, he mentioned that he was getting really annoyed about those first couple of podcast appearances and said, I couldn't watch or listen anymore, I had to turn it off. And you were going at that point, you know what? He's going to say what he's going to say. I'm not that bothered. But it sounds like this one got under your skin. Is it because it was an interview by Johnny Owen using his platform to showcase a man who he championed for a job, and then, frankly, Dyche failed in that job?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of rumours going around, aren't there, that there's a split in the club now, sort of the people who wanted him in, sort of Johnny Owen, Nick Randall, and then all the what's it called, the Wednesday club or the Thursday club, whatever day afternoon it is, that club, all those people, Gary Birtles and all that sort of old gang, because he's one of their mates, and so they obviously wanted him in the job, and they were happy that he got it, and they're obviously annoyed when he lost it. So there's a bit of a split between them and sort of the professional football people in the club now, and the boardroom. So that's not really healthy. And there's a split in. I mean, I don't do social media, but I've heard there's been a rather a large split in the fan base as well. So going quite heated and nasty between different people online and forums and things. Sort of people defending him and people sort of questioning whether you're a real Forest fan if you criticise him and all this sort of thing. But I think we just got to draw a line. And I wish he'd just let us draw a line under the whole episode.
Yeah, and that's the bit that I was going to say is that ultimately, you know, he's got a right to say what he wants to say. But as we discussed with those first podcast appearances, why is he doing it now? If it was a case of let the dust settle, wait a while, and then, you know, say what you got to say, then I think that there's something to be said for that. There's a certain kind of there's nothing to be gained from doing it right now. Let's put it that way.
No, and I think he's protesting too much, isn't he? He's sort of just that he keeps on saying, "Oh, I was right," and it's almost that thing where he knows on the inside that he was doing some things wrong, but that if he keeps on saying it more and more often, that it's going to somehow make it better and make it right.
And the case in point being the nearest you got to any journalistic rigor. And let's be honest, Johnny Owen is, you know, he's many things, but he's not a journalist. And he just that whole thing once again about him asking the players to run harder, and Sean Dyche once again doubling down on that. And it's very, very clear that was the core. If there was a single cause of his downfall, you could talk about tactics, you can talk about everything else, but by doing that, he was making sure that the players didn't trust him.
Yeah, and then I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. The point he was making, somebody texted in and said something of one of the Forest fans about if you don't need to run players ragged during the season if you're playing twice a week, and they sort of made a joke about it. So I don't understand. Are they saying they weren't training hard and therefore they weren't running them ragged, or they were and it's fine? So it didn't really make any sense. So the way he sort of defends it is that he thinks, yeah, I was training them really hard, but if he was, it doesn't make any sense. Later on during the show, Stuart Pearce came on, and he was talking about how players don't need to be flogged in training or overworked at this time of the season, and they both went very quiet at that point, I noticed.
There you go. And we're about to go quiet for just a minute, and we'll be back very shortly.
Welcome to Yates's Espresso Bar.
Welcome back to 1865 and to Yates's Espresso Bar. Maradona, the Midlands. Just before the break, we were talking about Sean Dyche appearing on a radio show, and similarly, Jack Colback has been doing the rounds on podcasts and radio shows, and recently he appeared on your mates, Hawksby and Jacobs, on their show on TalkSport. And I mean, he comes across as an affable guy. He's obviously, I think you mentioned he's got a book out, hasn't he?
I think so. Yeah, I think he was publicising his book. So
okay, and of course, you know, he's had a career which has had some ups and downs. Most recently, ending playing in non-league, oddly enough. But reflecting on his time at Forest, because he was part of the room that was present under the Sabri Lamouchi days. So Sabri obviously failed to get us in the playoffs and then retained his job, was actually given a new contract, and at the start of the season they had a famous Zoom call with a certain Evangelos Marinakis, and Colback's talking about how there's this massive screen and this massive guy appearing on this massive screen and basically telling them about how they all need to do better. I mean, Colback was pretty diplomatic in terms of the effects that had and so on. But he also made the point that it's something that's pretty extraordinary. And even for someone who had a long career in kind of the professional game, he was making the point that that's not normal, is it?
No, yeah, and it's not. I mean, there is the argument. It's his club. He can do what he wants. If he wants to berate his employees, that's fine. But then you look at it from the perspective of well-run clubs that are doing really well and do so season after season, and the professionalism that they employ. Say Pep Guardiola at Man City, Arteta at Arsenal, those sort of places, and you couldn't imagine ever one of the owners or board members being doing that or being allowed to do that by the coaches. So to sort of create that ideal environment of professionalism and all those sort of things, but having this sort of erratic, emotional figure constantly in the background, sort of coming down to the tunnel, being very happy when you win and being very, very annoyed when you lose, very publicly sort of smashing TV screens or whatever, and it can't be helpful, isn't it? It's not conducive to an environment that is all geared to success, when so much is now sort of spent on marginal gains and psychology and analysing this and analysing that, and then just throw a hand grenade of an owner into the situation. So I think probably does disrupt things and undoes a lot of that good work.
Yeah. Thinking about that though, you could argue, doesn't it not show he cares? And also, you painted the picture of certain clubs where the ownership are not getting involved. I'll give you two other examples. So we've got the situation at Tottenham where all of a sudden the chief executive and the director, sporting director, or whatever their titles are, suddenly became quite visible. Like the cameras are trained on them in the stands, and there's a lot of attention on them from the fans. And then, just to play devil's advocate, I cannot imagine there'd be a single Forest fan out there who would rather have, for example, Jim Ratcliffe rather than Evangelos Marinakis.
Yes, that's a good point. But then that's probably because Jim Ratcliffe has probably garnered more publicity than he should do as well, with his own sort of wacky views and seeking publicity where it's not really wanted. I mean, obviously, his passion is part of him, and that's part of the reason we've had the success. Part of the reason why, I mean, there's no logic to him sort of moving to the East Midlands and pumping hundreds of millions of pounds of money when he's from somewhere as far away as Greece. There's no logical reason for doing that. So we've got to be thankful that he's an illogical person who he does things on emotions in that sense. But it just, I think there's a line that can be drawn where you're not necessarily always. I don't know if anybody's ever watched Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares. It's also bad management, good management, where sort of the managers are micromanaging, the restaurant owners are micromanaging, going to the kitchen, sort of meddling with the menu and this sort of thing, and they should just let the people who they employ do that job. But I mean, it was a long time ago, the Jack Colback Zoom call thing, so maybe he doesn't do that as much now, and he's probably a bit happier with life in the Premier League. But so yeah.
And it's worth making the point, isn't it, that despite giving Sabri the new contract, this came after Forest managed to, prize defeat from the jaws of victory on a grand scale by not getting into the playoffs. And that was exactly what Marinakis had hung his hat on when taking over the club. We're going to get back in the big time.
Yeah, and you can forgive him for being completely incandescent with rage at the end of that season. And the beginning of the next season, we were terrible. There's no two ways around it.
But there's an argument that actually the Zoom call contributed to that rather than
maybe
as a result of that.
Yeah, I think it was after a league.
I think it's the first match of the season.
Was it the first match of the season or something? Something. I think Barnsley rings a bell. Something like that. I can't remember now. But
we always lost to Barnsley back then. So yeah. Speaking of teams we always lose to, just a quickie. The news has emerged today that Andoni Iraola is going to be leaving Bournemouth at the end of the season. Now, you always wonder what's going on when the announcement comes before the season, comes to a close. And we saw it with Glasner. Palace had a big wobble until everything settled down and the players and the manager decided, yeah, we're going to make the most of the rest of this season. Do you see Bournemouth having a big wobble? And bearing in mind that they are our opponents on the last day of the season, is there any chance that that could potentially work in our favour?
No, it won't work in our favour because we can't play against them. They're completely set up to sort of beat us every single time. We just can't cope with them.
But
But
might they be on the beach at that point? I know there's a
well,
chance they might
they
get
live on the
European
beach. They're
football,
in
but
Bournemouth. They're always on the beach in Bournemouth, aren't they? It's a
yeah, but
lovely beach.
they're going to be coming as far inland as you can in the UK.
But I think they'll be okay. I think it's probably been fairly well known that he'll be leaving at the end of the season because he's out of contract in the summer and he hasn't renewed it. And there's been so much interest in him from Forest to Tottenham to Man U now.
Saw people
And
speculating Arsenal if Arteta doesn't win the league this season.
yeah, well, even on the radio today, they were saying even Newcastle, even Liverpool, but it's the world's his oyster now. He's been linked to Athletic Bilbao. I think that's where he's from. He's one of the record appearance holders there. So he could really go anywhere he wants now. And I think he's got that sort of that nice guy vibe about him, so that the players aren't going to be too down on him for sort of wanting to move on. I think and they've got that mindset at the club where players and managers know that they're there for a good time, not a long time, and it is a stepping stone for greater things.
Welcome to Yates's Espresso Bar.
Welcome back to 1865 Nottingham Forest podcast and to part 3 of our visit to Yates's Espresso Bar. Maradona Midlands, we were having a bit of a chat, weren't we, about at the start of the podcast about how Forest are going on and about the kind of renewed optimism, rightly or wrongly, that fans are feeling right now. And this seems like a good time to remind ourselves of the interview that our very own Stephen Topless did with TNT sports commentator Adam Summerton. Let's just hear a minute of that.
Where does this Forest side stack up compared to what's left in the Europa League, and how far do you think that they can go in the competition?
Well, I think in terms of, if you're looking purely at the team on paper and you're not looking maybe at what's gone on behind the scenes, they're right up there in terms of they've got to be challenges for the Europa League. I think the way we assess the Europa League probably has changed now in that the format has changed, in that we don't have Champions League clubs dropping into it who clearly skewed it somewhat. I've been covering Villa recently. They, for me, are the favourites. I think they're the strongest squad on paper. But yeah, I think Forest are right up there, and it won't be easy in the next round, but it shouldn't be in the quarterfinals of a major European competition. But we've got a really good chance of an all Midlands semi-final, which would be quite the spectacle.
So Maradona, with thanks to Adam Summerton and Stephen Topless for that clip. Obviously, that was recorded before we had our first leg against Porto. How did you feel about the result in Portugal, and how do you feel that sets things up for this Thursday?
Well, I was very pleased with the result because before the match, looking at the team news, I thought we were in for a battering, and it could have still turned out that way had they been able to take their chances, Porto. But now I'm fairly confident. I think we'll go a reasonably strong team now for the home leg, and I think we saw in the first match we played in the group stage, they're not that good, are they, Porto? They're not particularly strong, and sort of. So I think I'm fairly confident. I'm very well. We'll get through. It might take penalties or something, but I think we'll get through.
Okay, and you mentioned about the team news, and earlier on we'd heard you talking about Chris Wood making his comeback. That feels big, doesn't it? And also, I don't expect to see this in the Europa League, but it also was quite significant that Pereira was quite keen to try Jesus in the number 10 role. And certainly, I thought Igor looked much happier. Baz did as well, as he talked about in the match report. But also, just as you mentioned, having Chris Wood in the team just means that the team are able to play 5-10 yards further forward, and there is a hope that when the ball goes in, there's a presence there. The thing that makes Wood a great striker isn't necessarily his finishing ability, which is very good, but I think it's his movement and his presence.
Yeah, and he's a big guy. He gives defenders something to think about. He sort of can bully them a bit and jostle them, and just having him there gives everybody else a little bit more room. We've seen when Igor Jesus gets a chance to finish, he's got great ability. We remember the goal at Brentford, and one or two other moments. This even the disallowed goal against Porto showed that he's given a little bit of space, and I think you do get more space in Europe. There's obviously standards not as high as the Premier League and not as defensive. The Premier League is first and foremost all about not conceding for every team. That's the biggest sin. You don't see that so much in European football. So that if he's given space, I think he'll thrive probably, and that number 10 role gives him a bit more space.
Yeah. Having said that, I don't expect him to play that on Thursday night. Do you expect us to revert to the back four with a more or less kind of first choice 11?
I think so. Well, I hope so, and I think. But I thought we probably would in the first leg after a 2-week or 3-week break. So, but I hope so. I think we've got to. You've got to try and take that chance now. I know.
And conversely, does that mean that against Burnley, basically it'll be a bit more mix and match between the two games than it was between the first leg and the Villa game?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Because we've done every combination so far this season. We've had times when we've sort of gone and not changed. We've had mix and match. I don't think there's as much of a difference now when they do bring somebody else in as there was earlier on in the season, and some of the players seem to have got up to speed a bit more.
Well, it helps when you're not getting called out by your gaffer.
Yeah, and maybe smart use of substitutions is the way to go on both. I mean, the Burnley match is huge as well. So a win there and takes us up to 36 points. And I think we'll just need one or two draws between now and the end of the season.
As we've talked about before, there have been so many times when there's been a run of games where we think we should be getting X number of points, and then we get nowhere near it.
Yeah, I was listening to the Burnley game on Saturday, and they were being described as pathetic and hopeless.
I know where you're going with this.
So hopefully that they'll continue that this weekend, and we can just finally just bury this thing and not being able to beat teams we should. Because I know I said before the Wolves game, if we can't beat Wolves at home, we don't deserve to stay up. We deserve to get relegated. There's a part of me that thinks, well, if we can't beat Burnley at home, this Burnley team, we deserve to get relegated. So I hope we do.
Oh gosh. Well, you've set it up now, haven't you? You've set it up. Just finally for tonight's episode, Vítor Pereira has talked about creating a family atmosphere. Obviously, we've drawn the kind of the uncle comparison if Nuno was a father figure. I think Forest have really gone hard on that, haven't they? So we saw the open training session. We've seen that amazing tifo that was there at the weekend for the Villa match for the young lad who rung the bell in his cancer recovery, who'd met the players. And we also saw some really wholesome Murillo content. So Forest are going hard on that. And one of the banners that Forza put in the Trent end was also talking about the value of togetherness and about how we all need to kind of be as one. That's the way to avoid relegation, isn't it?
It is, especially for a club of our size, where we're not one of the massive clubs in the country. That togetherness is such a benefit, and it's just such a positive feature of what we achieved over the last few years with the Steve Cooper promotion and then staying up. And then under Nuno, for an old cynic like me, it is a bit corny. And I'm not sure if I always believe that it's all genuine from the perspective of the club. But I know the fans who who buy into it really do believe it. And maybe I shouldn't be so cynical. Maybe the players really do love the fans and appreciate all of it, and it does help them. And it can't do any harm. Okay, a bit of corniness now and then. If that's the price to pay for staying up, well, I'll take it.
Yeah, and obviously, no matter what division we're in next season, there's a chance that Murillo might not be here. So, frankly, I'm all for treasuring every moment that he's in a red shirt, because I think that he is quite possibly the best centre half we've had at the City Ground since Des Walker, and in many ways. So I'm just grateful that he's here and enjoying him while it lasts. So I'm going to say thank you very much to the Maradona Midlands, and I'm going to say thank you to you for listening or watching, and you can join us again later in the week as we will be reporting after the Porto home leg. Obviously, we're hoping to get through to a Europa League semi-final against Sunday's opponents, Aston Villa. So let's just see how that goes. In the meantime, thanks for joining us. Come on, you Reds.
You've been listening to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review. It helps other listeners find our content.